weapons.
Yeah, but we don't have to be used as weapons. We are our own weapons, you know. I don't mean a weapon of assault or aggression. I mean, we must defend ourselves and defend our profession and not allow ourselves to be used. Because if we are used, once you throw your credit away, you can't get it back. Once you are compromised, that's it. You know, it's like a kind of disease. Once you're infected, it's very difficult to clean yourself. It's like corruption. You can't get rid of corruption once it's there. And I think that for a journalist, if you're going to do your job properly, you have to say, you know, whatever the cost, that's it. I don't mean you have to die. What I mean is that if your newspaper won't print what you write, or your television station won't show what you say, or your radio station won't broadcast what you say, then you've got to go elsewhere or maybe find another job.
Yes, I'm particularly thinking about, you know, Karadzic arrested recently. You know, all PR story about how he was, you know, very good camouflated, or everybody's camouflage. Everybody's speaking about that. Only last sentence in Bosnian media, I don't know anywhere else, is that he was accused for very hard, you know. I was thinking about that, you know, that we are sometimes don't thinking just using, you know.
Look, I was in Beirut when he was captured, and certainly the papers in Lebanon and the television reporting I saw there made it very clear that why he was being arrested, and they showed photographs from Srebrenica, the famous film of the men being taken away. I don't think in the Middle East, for example, where I was, there was much doubt about the purpose of his arrest, and certainly I saw a BBC report. I don't like the BBC, but I saw a BBC report which carried the usual pictures of Srebrenica, so there was not much doubt, I think, in the Western televisions as to why he'd been arrested. Now, Serb TV, that's something else. Obviously, there's an interest in a guy who manages to stay on the run for so long and then pretends to be the sort of herbalist doctor. I mean, it's preposterous. You know? It tells you a lot about the fact that he's a bit cracked. But I didn't think the reporting was too bad there. I mean, it wasn't as bad as, say, the reporting on the Georgia issue, which was much more slanted on both sides.
I was thinking about Bosnian.
I know you were, of course.
Okay. You was corresponding in Bosnia. Can you share with us some experience, you know, from there?
Well, depends where you start. You know, I'd been to Bosnia before the war. I was investigating the wartime past of Kurt Waldheim, who had been the UN Secretary General, and whom it turned out was a German intelligence officer in Banja Luka, Bosnia, in World War II. So I'd had experience of Bosnia. I went there in, must be something like 1987, 88. And when I was there, I noticed many tensions. Now, I'd been in Northern Ireland as a correspondent, and I'd been in Beirut. I'd come from Beirut, which has a civil war, sectarian. And I remember in Banja Luka, a Serb came up to me and said, "Why are you using a Croatian driver?" I had a driver from Zagreb called Horvat. This is before the war. And I said, "Why can't I use? You should be using a Serb driver." You see? I said, "What?" And I remember I was talking to my foreign editor on the phone. Remember, I was Middle East correspondent, chasing Kurt Waldheim's past. I wasn't interested in Bosnia per se. And I said, "Ivan, I think there's going to be a civil war here. I'm listening to what I heard in Lebanon before the war. It's just the same." He said, "Well, when it happens, you can report it, Robert," which I did. So I never wrote, you know, I was chasing a different story, and I should have written at the time, you know, hang on a second, something's going wrong in Bosnia. But I'd never been to Yugoslavia before. It was Yugoslavia then. I had a Yugoslav visa in my passport. And I can clearly remember turning to my companion and saying, "There's going to be a war. This is exactly what I've been through before." At the time, I was using the Serb archives in Banja Luka, which were archives from the captured Ustashi papers from the Croatian Ustashi in the Second World War. Then, when the war began, I remember thinking, well, I'm not surprised, because the war began in Slovenia, then it became the Croatian War, and then it became the Bosnian War. And for a time, I continued. I mean, I'm Middle East correspondent then, and I was then, and I am now. And then one day, I was in the west of Ireland in Galway, and I remember debating with my foreign editor that a lot of journalists are being killed in Bosnia. And I think at the beginning, one of the reasons was that the reporters were coming from London or New York. They'd never been on a war before, you know, so they were killed very easily. Their experience of war is movies, and the hero always lives. But in real life, the hero doesn't, you know, always live. And about a month later, my foreign editor said, would I, on the basis that I was a Middle East correspondent, I was also the Ottoman correspondent. And since Bosnia had been the Ottoman Empire, would I like to go to Bosnia? He was sort of finding a reason of getting me in. I said, sure, I'll go have a look at Bosnia. And I hadn't been to Sarajevo when I went before the war. And I arrived in Zagreb, to travel to Split to take the French aircraft into Sarajevo. And a friend of mine who was travelling with me had not been to Bosnia before. And she had a guidebook for Sarajevo. Of course, we knew what was happening. The city was under siege, and the Serbs were above it. And she held it out to me. She said, I think the front page picture more or less tells you the story. And of course, it showed these mountains surrounding all around poor little Sarajevo in the bottom. And I said, oh, Jesus, yes, I think I've got the message. I think I know what it's going to be like. Sarajevo was a very lethal war for journalists, but also it was a very savage war. In the Lebanese civil war, there were kind of rules in it. I mean, all wars have their rules. But in Lebanon, for example, if you approached a checkpoint and you had the right papers and you knew them, you could get through okay.